Hi everyone, welcome back to the library. It's Rhiannon again. You'll remember last time you came for your first year experience seminar library day. We learned how to look up articles using the library's database, but we didn't really talk about what situations you're going to be using those articles in or how to know if you found the right article for what you're doing. So today we'll have some time to talk about that. If I can get you to look up at the projector over here, you can see I have some photos up. And the situation is you've been invited to go out with your friends this weekend. How exciting! But you're having a hard time deciding what to wear. Do you think you want to wear something more casual, like the photo on the left? Or do you think you'd want to wear something a little more formal and elegant, like what's on the right? Which one do you think would be more appropriate? We'll have a little discussion. Hopefully, we'll get to the point where what you want to wear out depends on a few things: what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be going, maybe what the weather's like. And so we can bring it back into the appropriate attire to wear, depends on the context and your situation. So it's contextual. And so are your information needs. When you need to have some information or you need to look up an article, it's going to be dependent, the right one is going to depend on what you're going to be using it for, or so the context of your situation will dictate what kind of information source you're going to want. So let's go ahead and look at some of the different information types that are out there. So, a librarian at the University of Illinois made this handy infographic, and it kind of outlines the information cycle for us and goes over some of the broad information resource types that are out there. So, right when something immediately happens, where's the first place that you're going to see this news? Where's the first place that you're going to be able to access this information? A lot of times it's going to be on the TV, it's going to be something on social media, it's going to be tweeted by people, it's going to be in blogs, on the internet, and you're going to see all of that, boom, right when something happens. And then once a little bit of time has passed, maybe later on that week, it'll be in all your big newspapers. You can look it up in the New York Times, maybe the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Washington Post, things like that. And then the next week, you'll see them in your popular magazines that come out, your Newsweeks and your Times and things like that. And then it can take a couple of months, it can take several months, and then you'll see it in the scholarly journals that we were looking at last time in some of the databases. So that's going to take a couple of months to hit there. And then about a year later, you'll start seeing it in all of the government documents, in the reference sources that we have up on the second floor, and in your general books with extensive write ups on them. So, judging by that, what do you think some of the advantages of the social media posts and blogs and web resources are? We'll have a little discussion. Hopefully, they'll see the advantage is that you can get the information right away. So, what are some of the disadvantages of some of these social media posts and blogs and web resources? Sometimes because they happen so fast, they haven't all the information hasn't really been sorted out or vetted yet, and you can't rely on it for the same amount of accuracy, just because of the nature of its timeliness. And so, what do you think some of the advantages of the scholarly and peer-reviewed articles are? So hopefully they'll see, or I could guide them, that this information is going to be a little more vetted. It's going to have a little more credibility. They'll have time, enough time has passed to do some real in-depth analysis of these events. But what are some of the disadvantages of these scholarly and peer-reviewed articles? And that would be that it takes so long for them to come out. Sometimes that could be a big disadvantage if you need the information right away. And we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. What even is peer review anyway? So the peer review process, even after a scholar has done all the research, written up their paper, after they've submitted it, before it's published, the journal will have an editorial board, and they'll send actually the actual paper out to the scholars' peers, so other scholars in the field who are subject experts, and they'll read through it and say, no, this article is not ready for publication. It never will be, or maybe you could make these changes and it will be, or maybe they will think that it's good enough to go out right then. But one of the advantages of these scholarly and peer reviewed articles is they have been reviewed by other subject experts, so we can trust the quality of the information a little bit more. So, how are you able to tell the difference between these two types of articles? And you can see right here we have an example. These are on the same topic. It's a psychology topic. It's the use of humor to make people feel better, basically. But on the left is one from a scholarly journal, Existential Analysis, and the authors have done an in-depth study of the use of humor in psychotherapy processes, and they have spelled out all of their methodology. They present their findings, and you can see all their references and their citations. And the language of it is very subject specialist. You would need to have a background in psychology to understand the terminology that they're using. Whereas the one on the right from Psychology Today is, which is a popular magazine, it's written in a language that is very accessible to the layperson. You don't have to know everything about psychology to understand what they're saying. They're going to use simple terms and explain big ideas more simply so that everyone can read it. And even though this author does reference other studies and other articles that are written, they don't have a formal references page in the same way that a scholarly article would. So kind of the tone, the vocabulary, and the use of references and citations, those are all good clues to whether you're looking at a scholarly article or you're looking at a popular article. So those are some good clues for you right there. And then kind of beyond that, so any article, scholarly or popular, is going to have some degree of credibility or trustworthiness. So anytime you're presented with information, whether it's a tweet or an academic paper, you're going to have to look at it and decide if this is the kind of information that you want to trust. So there are a few very simple ways to approach this to see, and I always start with who wrote it. Is this a researcher from a big university? Is this a puff piece put out by the PR firm for a company going through some kind of scandal in the media? Is this a private company trying to promote a certain product or discredit its competitors? Is this a government publication coming out studies for the American people done? So, and hand in hand with who created it is you also want to look at why did they create it? Are they trying to push their own agenda? Are they trying to open up the discourse for other scholars to weigh in? So kind of who created the resource and why can let you know if this is the kind of information that you want to trust. And another thing you want to look at is the accuracy of the information. Does it coincide with other facts that you know to be true, or does it rely on false assumptions or gut feeling? And is it current information? So you don't want to look at something that's too outdated, like I know I'm ancient, but when I learned that Pluto was a planet, and so now if I were going to a science textbook, that would be a big red flag for me because I would know that this information is not up to date. And then the last one to me is the real meat of it. So is what they're saying supported by evidence? Did they do their own research? Did they do their own study? And do they present their findings in a way that you can understand, in a way that you could recreate the experiment? And if they rely on information from outside sources, did they provide a list of references and citations so that you can go back and check their sources? So to me, this is just a really good way to get started on evaluating whether or not you have a source that you want to trust. So now that you guys have this information on kind of the different types of information that's out there and kind of a beginner checklist for deciding if it's trustworthy or not, we're going to put this into practice. And so we're going to get, okay, you two can be in a group, you three can be in a group, and I'm going to pass out an art. Every group is going to get an article. They can be scholarly or they can be popular, just kind of depends on which one you get. And I want you to do two things with this article. I want you to sit with your partner or your group, and you're gonna read through it. Some of the scholarly ones are a little bit longer, so you don't have to read it word for word, but you're gonna kind of read through and get the gist of it. And I want you to decide on a situation where you think that this would be the best information source. So, what's I just want you to describe kind of the ideal scenario where you would find this and this would be the article that served your needs the best. And then part two is going to be, do you think this article is authoritative or credible or trustworthy? Is this a good source? And I want you to really think about why that is. So, what criteria did the article meet or not meet that led you to trust it or not? So, I want you to think of a situation where this would be a great article, and I want you to decide if this is a credible article or not. So, I'm going to give you all a few minutes. Everybody can let me know if you have any questions. I'll be bouncing around. I might weigh in if you get a little stuck. So here's an example of the kinds of articles I would use for this. So Flagstaff DACA college students in limbo after lower tuition killed. So this is something that happened just the other day. It's very timely. So this is a popular article from a news source in Arizona. And it goes through and it just kind of says what happened and what decisions were made. And then this other one is a scholarly article on a similar topic, and the researcher has gone through and looked how specific policies have affected different immigrant groups in American universities. So you can see that he has a methodology section and you can see the reference section. So hopefully these are the kinds of things that students will be looking at in our little experiment. So now we'll have time to share the results with the class. We'll call on groups, and they can say if their article was scholarly or popular, and maybe the scholarly article would be good if you were doing research into the effects of immigration policies on students in America. And then maybe the popular news article would be good if you were trying to stay on top of trends in higher education, in immigration, and scenarios like that. And then this part is going to be super great. I want all the students to tell me if the article that they have is credible. And if it is credible, I want to know why. And I'm going to be up at the board writing down why they thought it was credible. So it came from a good source, was put out by the government, was put out by a research university, is supported by evidence, things like that. And then I want students whose articles they didn't think were that credible, I want them to say kind of why, and we'll use the inverse of that to add to our list. And we'll have a student-created kind of checklist for saying whether or not an article can be trusted. And so now that we have our list of credible sources and we have the knowledge to pick out which information source would be best in which situation, we'll always be dressed for success because we'll know to look at the context. And just to check for understanding, I'll be passing out a quiz. It has a little description, two descriptions of two different articles, and it'll have kind of different situations that you could be in on the other side. So doing research for a paper, staying on top of the news, looking at the weather, different things like that. And I just want you to pair the information need with the information source type. And I'll have a little space at the bottom, and I just want you to jot down 3 different ways to judge the credibility of a source. All right, thank you very much. I hope y'all enjoyed your day at the library. My name is Rhiannon. If you ever need any help, just stop by. Thanks.